Iran has said it is ready to deal with any possible scenario regarding the fate of the nuclear deal between Tehran and the P5+1 group of countries. The Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said Washington's possible withdrawal from the agreement, also known as the JCPOA, will be met with a firm and appropriate response. Araghchi added that Iran will never allow its interests to be harmed by Washington. The Iranian diplomat has stressed that the world will witness how Tehran is able to reactivate its capacities and upgrade them to a much higher level. Those remarks come as the American president has repeatedly described the JCPOA as a bad deal. Donald Trump has threatened that May 12th will be the last time he waives sanctions against Iran unless the accord is, quote, fixed. Joining us live now from Bristol to discuss that further is Tony Gosling, who is an investigative journalist. Tony, as always, thanks for joining us. What do you make of the upcoming May 12th deadline and what may happen on that date?
Well, I think we're quite used, actually, aren't we, to the US bullying over this JCPOA deal. I think it was really Obama's crowning glory. It was one of the great things that Obama managed to sort out in his presidency. And this lays the potential for peace in the Middle East, doesn't it? Because a lot of the tension was around the alleged development of nuclear weapons, nuclear power development by Iran. And this was the deal which was going to stop that becoming a danger for the other nuclear armed power in the Middle East, which is Israel. I think that's really what this is all about, because the Americans don't have very much of a private, personal US interest in, of course, it's over 10,000 miles away from the United States. So it's really the Israelis, I think, who've been pulling the strings in the US in order to try and unravel this deal, simply because they don't actually want peace with Iran. The Netanyahu government is kind of built on a war agenda, and just as happened when Netanyahu first came to power in the mid-1990s, scuppering the Oslo peace deal, as he did, at the time, just throwing it away, which was the best promise for peace we'd had for decades in the Middle East. I'm afraid that Netanyahu doesn't want that peace now. He's made that absolutely clear.
So, Tony, what happens, do you think, next? Will Europe stand by the United States? Will Europe, step away from the United States vis-a-vis its policies towards the JCPOA?
Okay, so there's a very different policy in Europe. I think that's absolutely clear. And you know why that is? That's because Europe is geographically much closer. The NATO alliance, which still ostensibly includes Turkey, countries like Cyprus and Greece are much, much closer to the region. And so they're much more sensitive to what happens there. They don't want a war. The Israelis seem to. The Americans don't really seem to have a fear of it because they're so far away. I think what we'll find is some serious pressure back from the European Union, although, of course, not from Britain now. And there are a lot of people who are rather pleased in Europe to see Britain disappearing off into the Atlantic as part of Brexit, because the British have been a real problem, basically a kind of Trojan horse for the United States in the European Union. So I think what we'll see is some common sense, actually, from the Germans, from the French, from the Italians, etc., in sticking to the JCPOA as actually what is a very good deal. And what it does is it builds the foundations for a possible permanent peace in the Middle East. That is, if the Israelis will allow it.
All right, Tony, we'll leave there at that. But of course, as always, we appreciate you taking your time out to speak to us here at Press TV.